comes to us from Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 62. When the days grew near for Jesus to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent his messengers ahead of him. On their way, they entered a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. But they did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem. When his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But he turned and rebuked them. Then he went on into another village. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." To another he said, "Follow me." But the man said, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." And another said, "I will follow you. But first, let me say farewell to those at my home." Jesus said to him, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Please be seated. Grace and peace to the disciples of God. Now, a quick question this morning, just a quick opinion poll. How many of you believe that technology makes certain tasks easier? Washing the laundry, washing machine, or washing board? Easy, no brainer. How many of you enjoy staying in touch with your family on Facebook or Instagram? I personally love it. I have family that lives in Arkansas, Michigan, Texas, and if it wasn't for that, it would be a lot harder keeping up with family. But on the other hand, we know that technology can be misused in ways that the inventors never ever thought that they could be misused when they were invented. For an example is, if you need or want to beef up the views on YouTube for $150, you can buy 30,000 views from a site called 500views.com. And for $3,100, they'll make your video go viral. I've often heard of these videos going viral, and sometimes I look at them and say, what makes that one stick out? Well, maybe they paid the $3,100. And this comes from an article that concluded that no matter what social network you are on, you can buy your way to popularity. You can really buy friends. How's that? But it's a shame now when we think about it that Jesus didn't have this technology in his day. Because in the passage of Luke, it looks like Jesus was having a really tough time getting followers for his ministry. And those who were following him, his disciples, didn't understand his ministry at all. Because in verse 51, it is stated that Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Now, a literal interpretation of this means that he set his face towards Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was the capital for the Jewish nation. And it's the place where the religious and political power met in ancient days. And in all honesty, Jesus' disciples really thought that they were going to be going to Jerusalem this time to take over. They were going to be control. And just before this, in John 46, it said that they were arguing about who was going to be the greatest. And we've heard this before, the arguments. Who's going to be on the right hand and who's going to be on the left? Oh, Lord, it's certainly going to be me. No, me, take me. Sounds just like us kids. The disciples were so excited that they were going. But they had no idea what Jesus' task was going to be. But Jesus knew that by putting his face and going to Jerusalem, that this is going to be the place where he is going to die. He knew this was the path God was taking him on. He knew he was going to be suffering. He knew death lay at the end of the path for him. Now, like I said, the disciples had no idea this is where Jesus was leading them. If they did, they'd probably say, "What? Get out of here. You mean Jerusalem is really where you're planning to go to die? I mean, you're this great king." But Jesus was moving forward to fulfill God's plan and his promise to humanity. He was going for redemption of all of creation. And that's why the opening verse about Jesus resolutely setting his face towards Jerusalem is so important to understand. Motivational speaker Tony Robbins loves racing cars. I didn't know that about him. He said the most important lesson his new race car instructor taught him was how to recover from a skid. For those of us who grew up where there was more snow than here, that was always the big fear of new drivers. Driving in snow and what to do if the car starts to skid. We were always told to put your wheels towards the skid. We just want to always go the way we want to go there, but it was always turned into the skid. But the race car, it must be different for race car drivers, because Tony Robbins' instructor said, oftentimes when people go into a skid, they turn towards where their fear is. So they turn towards the wall. And he was in one of these simulated skid cars and was going at a really high pace of speed. And the instructor pushed this button that made the car go into a skid. Instantly, he turns, he said, towards the wall. And his instructor took his head and turned it toward the way he was wanting to go. And he went that way and came out of the skid. And wouldn't it be fabulous if we're on our way and all of a sudden God were to take our head and look at him and said, "This is where you're supposed to be going." Because time and time again, I know we all have made the wrong mistakes. And this little sign is one of these signs that you can put on your rear view mirrors. And I just always really enjoyed this, is don't look back. That's not where you're going. And that so much reminded me of today's sermon, that we can learn from our mistakes, but let's not go back there. God has forgiven all of these mistakes. If we say, "God, please forgive us," they're gone. He's wiped it clean. Let's now set our direction on the right path and listen to where God wants us to go. And that's really what Jesus is trying to do in this particular story. He's wanting people to focus on things in their life that really count. Today's gospel is a fascinating story because Luke tells us that as the time approached for Jesus to go up to heaven, Jesus resolutely sets out for Jerusalem. And he sends messengers ahead, and they went to a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. But when the messengers got there, they said, no, we don't want Jesus here. He's on his way to Jerusalem, the head of the power place. And when James and John saw this and asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them? It reminds you, and it has to be amazing, how out of sync they are with Jesus' ministry. Because they really had no idea on Jesus' plan for our world. No idea what his great ministry was. And they've been with him for years. And so it's always fascinating to me that they didn't understand. No idea. But they finally went, the disciples went to another village. And along the way, a man says, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says, nah, you wouldn't. Because where I go, there's no place to lay your head. And the next man says, I'll go with you, but first. And the third says, I'll follow you, but first. Everybody had their own agenda to do before they followed Jesus. Now, all these players in this passage, they're all focused on their own agenda, even the disciples. I'm going to be one of your best. No, make it me. So we have all these people vying for position. And we know in the end, they're all going to run away and deny and say, no, not me. This isn't easy. It's not what I signed up for. But Jesus never, ever hid the demands of what he was asking the followers to do. He never said, follow my way and it's going to lead to death. It's going to lead to suffering. He tells them, but they don't ever get it. They don't listen. They're hearing what they want to. And that's a common, I think we all do that at some point. But setting our face toward Jerusalem means wanting God's will more than our own. Gladys Allward was a young housemaid in London whose life was changed when she heard an evangelist preach on serving God with your whole life. Not just your Sunday life, not just the easy part, but with your whole life. And that day changed Gladys's life. She had started getting this overwhelming passion for international mission. And she began reading about China. And she took on extra jobs to save up money to travel there. Now Gladys was a small, shy, poorly educated woman, but she trusted that if God was calling her to the mission field, then he would equip her for it. Then in 1938, when Japan invaded her region in China, Gladys led 100 Chinese orphans through the mountains to safety. And her ministry was so powerful and effective that she was invited to speak in many major churches in Europe. She met the Queen of England, and her story was made into a movie in Hollywood. And it's called The Inn of the Sixth Happiness. Happy name. And afterwards, Gladys said she felt like she had little to offer God. But when she sensed that God was calling her to give her life to mission work, she knew that no matter what the cost would be to her, God would make it happen. And that's a fabulous thing to know. So setting your face toward Jerusalem means just submitting your will entirely and fearlessly to God. Kenneth Bailey told a story of teaching some short courses at a Lutheran church of Latvia, over there somewhere. And while there, he observed the interviewing process of prospective students for the ministry. And the interviewers told Bailey the most important question they could ask a prospective student was, so I'm thinking, what would it be? What's your favorite food, your favorite color? If you could be any animal in the world, what would it be? But it was, when were you baptized? And I thought, well, for many of us, we were probably baptized as infants. But during this time period, it was important to know when the person had been baptized, because if they had been baptized during the Soviet regime, it was a more dangerous time to stand up for your faith. And they knew if it was before the fall of the wall, how important it was, as opposed to after, when it was easier. So there are times in our life when we stand up for what we believe can be more important than other times. And that was something I had really never thought of before. So it's important all the time to stand up for our faith. But there are probably some times when we feel more uncomfortable, or we think it's not the politically correct time to state what our faith is. Maybe those are the really important times, and God is talking to us. So there are times at all times, there should not ever be a time that we are afraid to stand up and say what our belief about Jesus is. We should be able to share this love of Jesus at all times. Today was a little difficult for me coming in to share the gospel with you. It is one that I had not written, but I knew that God had called and given these words to Pastor to let everybody know about today. So to come up here and read what God has told someone else, shared with someone else to share with you, is a bit more difficult. So I have stumbled around today, and I apologize. The words may not have come out quite as smoothly because I didn't have quite the time to practice and put my pauses in my sermons. If you would ever see how I write, you'll see, put great pause, and I might turn 2-3 pages. But these are passionate words from Pastor today, and he does send his love and his greetings, and he is with you here today. So the question is, do we believe in Jesus enough to resolutely set our face towards Jerusalem? And I hope God's people will say, Amen. It's me.